My people, they say that the person you treat like a dog today might be the one who decides if you breathe tomorrow. Chief Mrs. Victoria thought her billions could buy the silence of the spirits. She slapped her maid, she mocked the poor, and she spat on the traditions of the river. But she didn't know that the girl scrubbing her floor was actually a queen from the deepest part of the ocean, sent to weigh her heart on the scales of the ancestors. Tonight, the mansion is drowning, the gold is turning to sand, and Victoria is about to find out that when the water spirit comes for her wages, she doesn't take cash, she takes souls. Stay tuned, because this story will change the way you look at your house help forever. The sun did not just rise over Chief Mrs. Victoria's mansion in the heart of Lekki. It seemed to ask for her permission first. Victoria was a woman whose jewelry clinked with the sound of several lifetimes' worth of labor. A woman who walked as if the earth was a dirty rug laid out solely for her expensive Italian heels. She lived in a house of glass and gold, but her heart was a dark room where no light could enter. To Victoria, wealth was not a blessing to be shared, but a weapon to be used against those she considered lesser than herself. She believed that the thickness of a person's wallet determined the value of their soul, and since hers was overflowing, she looked down on the world with a sneer that could wither a rose in full bloom. My people, they say that pride goes before a fall, but Victoria believed she had bought the ground so she could never hit it. She treated her domestic staff like disposable rags, firing them for the smallest offenses. One maid was sent away in the middle of a rainy night because she put too much salt in the soup. Another was arrested because she dared to look Victoria in the eyes while being insulted. The neighborhood whispered that Victoria's house was a graveyard of dreams, a place where young girls from the village came with hope and left with broken spirits and empty pockets. But Victoria did not care for whispers. She only cared for the reflection of her own power in the mirrors that lined her hallways. She was the lioness of Lekki, and she feared no one, neither man nor the ancient spirits of the land. When the news came that a new maid was arriving from a remote village in the riverine areas of the Delta, Victoria didn't even look up from her gold-plated phone. Amara arrived at the gate carrying nothing but a small, curiously heavy clay pot wrapped in a damp cloth. She was a girl of perhaps 19, with skin the color of polished mahogany and eyes that seemed to hold the depth of 1,000 lakes. There was a stillness about her that was unsettling, a silence that didn't feel like fear, but like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. While other girls trembled when they saw the massive gate of the mansion, Amara walked in with a grace that made the very air seem to grow humid and thick. She did not bow as low as the others, and she did not stammer when the guards shouted at her to move faster. Victoria, walking down the marble stairs, her voice dripping with acid. "So, this is the gift from the village. You look like you were pulled out of a swamp. Look at your clothes, they are damp and they smell of mud. Listen to me carefully, village girl. In this house, my word is the only law. You will wake up at 4 a.m. to scrub the floors until I can see my face in the tiles. You will not eat until I have finished my third meal of the day. And you see that clay pot? I want it thrown in the bin. We do not keep village trash in this sanctuary of elegance. Do you understand me? Or did the water in your ears make you deaf?" Amara, her voice calm like a slow-moving stream. "The pot stays with me, ma. It holds the memories of my mother and the blessings of the water. I will walk until the sun sets and the moon rises, but the pot does not leave my side. It is the only thing I have that your money cannot buy." The first week was a nightmare that would have broken 1,000 men, but Amara enjoyed it with a terrifying silence. Victoria increased the workload every day, making Amara wash those white curtains 5 times in a single afternoon because she claimed the scent of the village was still clinging to them. She made Amara sleep on the cold kitchen tiles without a blanket, even when the air conditioner was turned to its highest setting. Victoria would intentionally spill red wine on the floor just to watch Amara go down on her knees to scrub it. She would invite her wealthy friends over and point at Amara, laughing at her simple wrapper and mocking her silence. "She is a mute donkey," Victoria would boast. "I bought her soul for a pittance, and now she serves me like the animal she is." But what Victoria did not notice was that every time she insulted Amara, the water in the house began to behave strangely. The taps would moan when Victoria turned them on, and the water in her glass would ripple even when no one was moving. Amara would sit in the dark kitchen at night, whispering to her clay pot, and the shadows on the wall would dance like waves. One evening, Victoria grew particularly cruel. She accused Amara of stealing a diamond earring that Victoria had actually misplaced herself. Without evidence, she grabbed a heavy leather belt and struck Amara across the shoulders. Amara did not cry out. She simply turned her head, and for a split second, her eyes flashed a brilliant oceanic blue. The air in the room suddenly turned freezing cold, and the sound of a distant roaring waterfall filled Victoria's ears. To understand who Amara was, one must look back to the village of Uruama, where the river meets the sea in a violent embrace. The elders tell of the Lady of the Foam, a powerful water spirit who was once the guardian of all the rivers in the south. She was a spirit who valued 2 things above all: the purity of the water and the humility of the human heart. It was said that once every 100 years, she would walk the earth in the form of a humble girl to see if humanity had learned to love or if they had become slaves to their own greed. Those who showed her kindness were blessed with wealth that never dried up, but those who treated her with cruelty found that their lives became like salt in a wound. Amara was not just a maid, she was the lady herself, disguised in the flesh of a servant. My people, Victoria's mother had once warned her about the spirits that walk the earth. But Victoria had long ago traded her traditions for the pursuit of paper wealth. She mocked the old stories, calling them the fairy tales of the ignorant. She didn't realize that the girl scrubbing her toilets was the same entity that controlled the tides and the rain. Every drop of sweat that fell from Amara's brow onto the mansion floor was being recorded by the ancestors. The spirits were watching as Victoria threw a plate of hot food at Amara because the pepper was too little. They were watching as Victoria made Amara stand in the sun for 6 hours as punishment for dropping a glass. The cup of Victoria's iniquity was filling up, and soon it would overflow with a force that no amount of money could stop. The turning point came on a Tuesday night, during a storm that seemed to tear the very sky asunder. Victoria was preparing for her Diamond Gala, an event where she planned to humiliate her rivals by wearing a necklace worth 50 million naira. She called Amara to her room to fasten the clasp, but her fingers were shaking from the cold that seemed to radiate from the girl. As Amara touched the necklace, the diamond suddenly turned into dull grey pebbles in Victoria's hand. Victoria screamed in rage, turning around to slap Amara with all her might. But this time, Amara did not move. She caught Victoria's wrist mid-air, and her grip felt like a band of frozen iron. The lights in the mansion began to flicker and hiss, and the sound of rushing water became so loud it felt as if the walls were about to burst. Amara, her voice now echoing from everywhere and nowhere. You have spent 40 days trying to break a spirit that was born before the first mountain was formed. You have used your tongue like a whip and your wealth like a shroud. You asked me why I brought this clay pot into your house, Victoria. Would you like to see what is inside? Would you like to see the true reflection of your soul? Victoria, trembling, her voice high and thin. Let go of me. I will have you killed. I will call the police. You are a witch. I knew it. Security! Security! But the security guards were gone. In their place was only a thick, swirling mist that smelled of salt and ancient depths. The doors were locked from the inside, not by keys, but by the weight of the water. Amara slowly began to tip the clay pot, and instead of water, a dark, viscous liquid began to pour out, spreading across the floor like an ink stain. As the dark liquid touched the expensive furniture, the mansion began to transform. The gold-leafed chairs rotted into soggy driftwood in seconds. The silk curtains turned into tattered fishing nets, and the marble floor became a treacherous marsh of mud and weeds. Victoria watched in horror as her sanctuary of wealth dissolved around her, replaced by the damp, suffocating atmosphere of a haunted swamp. She tried to run, but her feet were stuck in the mud that was once her designer rug. The lioness of Lekki was now a terrified animal trapped in a cage made of her own sins. Amara stood in the center of the chaos, her simple wrapper now glowing with the light of 1,000 pearls, her hair flowing upward as if she were underwater. Victoria, weeping, sinking into the mud. Please, take the money, take the house, just make it stop. I will give you anything. I'll make you the owner of everything I have. You still do not understand, daughter of dust. I do not want your paper. I do not want your glass house. I wanted to see if you remembered how to be human. I gave you 40 chances, one for every day I served you. For 40 days, I watched you choose cruelty over kindness. For 40 days, I watched you spit on the face of God in the form of a servant. Now the time of testing is over. The water has come to reclaim its own. Everything you have was built on the backs of those you crushed, and like a sand castle at high tide, it must wash away. Suddenly, the room was filled with the spirits of the women Victoria had mistreated. They appeared as shimmering figures made of mist, their eyes filled with the sadness Victoria had caused. There was Sister Comfort, whose son had died because Victoria refused to pay her salary on time. There was Grace, the young girl who was falsely accused of theft and spent 2 years in prison. They didn't speak, but their presence was a chorus of accusations that echoed in Victoria's mind. She saw the faces of every person she had stepped on to climb her mountain of gold, and she realized that the mountain was actually made of their bones. The weight of her guilt became a physical pressure, pushing her deeper into the mud until only her head was above the surface. My people, imagine the terror of realizing that your life has been a monument to vanity. Victoria cried out for her friends, but they were nowhere to be found. She cried out for her lawyers, but their contracts were nothing but wet paper in the wind. In the face of the spirit world, the things of the earth lose their power. Amara walked toward her, each step sending ripples through the mud. She reached into the air and pulled out a single glowing drop of water. This is the tear of an orphan you mocked. It is heavier than all your gold. She let the drop fall on her forehead, and the woman felt a pain sharper than any physical blow. It was the pain of 1,000 broken hearts entering her own. The mansion wall finally gave way, and a massive wave of ocean water crashed into the room. But strangely, it didn't drown Victoria. It only washed away the last of her illusions. She found herself standing on a deserted beach, her expensive clothes replaced by the same faded, mud-stained wrapper that Amara had worn. Her jewelry was gone, her skin was wrinkled, and her hands were rough with the calluses of a laborer. She looked around and saw a small, dilapidated hut made of palm fronds. This was to be her new home, a place where she would live as a servant to the very community she had once despised. Amara stood on the waves, her form growing larger and more transparent until she filled the horizon. Your life as Chief Victoria is dead. From today, you shall be known as Nemiri, the one who serves the water. You will work this land, you will feed the hungry, and you will wash the feet of the poor. If after 7 years you have learned the true meaning of a humble heart, perhaps the water will allow you to return. But if you hold on to your pride, the tides will take you, and your name will be forgotten by the wind. Victoria screamed at the sky, "Why me? Why was I chosen for this?" Because you are given much, and much was expected of you. You are given the power to lift others, but you used it to bury them. The higher the tree, the harder the wind blows against it. Remember this, Victoria. The river does not drink its own water, and the tree does not eat its own fruit. You are meant to be a channel of blessing, but you became a stagnant pond. Now you must flow. The story did not end with a sudden miracle. For 7 long years, Victoria lived in that hut. She who had once refused to touch common water now walked 5 miles every morning to fetch it for the elderly in the village. She who had mocked the smell of mud now spent her days planting yams and cassava to feed the orphans. At first, she cast the spirits every night, her heart still burning with the embers of her old pride. But as the years passed, the silence of the beach and the rhythm of the waves began to change her. She started to see the beauty in a shared meal and the wealth in a child's smile. She realized that her mansion was a prison and her money was a blindfold that kept her from seeing the true light of life. One morning, exactly 7 years to the day, Victoria went to the shore to wash her face. She looked into the water and saw not the face of a chief, but the face of a woman whose eyes were clear and peaceful. She saw a woman who had finally found her soul. As she touched the water, the same clay pot that Amara had carried appeared on the sand before her. It was no longer heavy with bark liquid, but filled with pure, shimmering water that smelled of lilies. A voice whispered in the breeze, "The test is over. The heart has been washed." Victoria didn't ask to go back to her mansion. She didn't ask for her gold. She simply bowed her head and whispered, "Thank you."
They say that a woman appeared in Lekki one day, looking remarkably like the late Chief Mrs. Victoria, who had disappeared 7 years prior. But this woman was different. She didn't drive a fleet of cars. She walked among the people, sharing her wisdom and using her remaining resources to build schools and hospitals. She never spoke of where she had been, but whenever she passed a body of water, she would stop and bow her head in deep respect. The lioness was gone, replaced by a servant of the people. And in her home, there was always a small clay pot on the mantle, a reminder that the greatest power in the world is not the one that rules from a throne, but the one that serves from the floor. My brothers and sisters, what is the lesson of this story? It is a warning to those who think that their position in life gives them the right to treat others like footstools. We are all travelers on this earth, and the person you look down on today might be the one who decides your fate tomorrow. Do not let your wealth become your God, and do not let your success become your coffin. Treat your mates, your drivers, and the strangers you meet with the same respect you would give a king, for you never know when you are in the presence of a spirit. Amara's voice, fading out. Remember, the water is always watching. It flows into the palace and it flows into the hut. It knows the truth of every heart. Stay humble, for the tide that brings the fish can also wash away the house. I am your narrator. If this story has touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment humility below to show you have learned the lesson of the water, and subscribe to African Folktales by Samo Baba. Until next time, may your path be clear and your heart be light. Goodbye.